Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is dead, killed on the morning of Saturday, February 28, 2026, in a coordinated military strike executed by the United States and Israel, a moment that has fractured the Middle East, shaken the architecture of global security, and forced every government on Earth to confront the most dangerous nuclear uncertainty of this generation. The man who ruled the Islamic Republic of Iran for nearly 4 decades, who built the proxy network that stretched from Lebanon to Yemen, who held the theological line between a nuclear-capable state and a nuclear-armed one, is gone. And the question that no intelligence agency, no diplomat, and no world leader can answer with confidence tonight is the one that matters most. Who controls Iran's nuclear weapons program now? Iranian state media confirmed the death in a formal statement broadcast across multiple state television channels in the early hours of Sunday morning Tehran time. Iran's Supreme National Security Council declared that Khamenei had been killed in his office while carrying out his duties at the moment of the attack. State broadcaster IRIB announced the news in a solemn bulletin. The Supreme Leader of Iran has reached martyrdom. The semi-official Tasnim news agency issued the formal declaration. It is announced to the Iranian people that His Eminence Grand Ayatollah Imam Saeed Ali Khamenei, leader of the Islamic Revolution, was martyred in the joint attack launched by America and the Zionist regime on the morning of Saturday, February 28. Officials confirmed that Khamenei's daughter, son-in-law, and grandson were also killed alongside him. Iran declared a 40-day national mourning period. Khamenei was 86 years old. He had held the supreme leadership of Iran since 1989, the second supreme leader in the history of the Islamic Republic and by far the longest serving. The strikes that killed him were not a surprise in their strategic intent. They were the culmination of weeks of escalating military and diplomatic pressure that had been building openly. The operation followed explicit public threats from President Donald Trump that Washington would strike Iran unless its leadership agreed to American demands, particularly over its nuclear program. On Thursday, just 48 hours before the bombs fell, American and Iranian officials held a last-ditch round of mediated nuclear talks in Oman. The Omani Foreign Minister, Badr al-Busaidi, said publicly that a deal was within reach. By Saturday morning, there was no deal. There were only strikes. The scale of the military operation was extraordinary by any modern standard. Approximately 200 Israeli fighter jets participated in a coordinated assault that simultaneously dropped hundreds of munitions on approximately 500 targets across Iran, according to official Israeli military statements. A spokesman for the Iranian Red Crescent confirmed that 24 of Iran's 31 provinces were struck. More than 200 people were killed across Iran, and more than 700 were injured in the initial assault. Among the dead were at least 1 in 8 people, most of them children, killed when an explosion destroyed the Shajara Taika Girls Elementary School in the southern city of Manab. 2 additional students were killed at a school east of Tehran. The human toll is still being counted. It will continue to rise. 7 senior Iranian security and defense officials were confirmed killed in the strikes, according to statements released by the Israel Defense Forces. Among them were IRGC Commander Major General Mohammad Pakpour, Defense Minister Brigadier General Aziz Nasirzadeh, and Ali Shamkhani, Secretary of Iran's Defense Council and one of Khamenei's most trusted personal advisors. The senior U.S. official separately confirmed that approximately 40 Iranian officials in total were killed across the operation. The elimination of that entire leadership tier in a single morning of coordinated strikes represents the most comprehensive decapitation of a sovereign government's military and security command structure in the modern era. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the nation on Saturday evening in a televised statement. "We destroyed the compound of the tyrant Khamenei in the heart of Tehran," Netanyahu said. "There are many signs that the tyrant himself is no more." He confirmed that senior Revolutionary Guard commanders and nuclear program officials had been eliminated in the strikes and stated that the operation was undertaken to remove what he called the existential threat posed by the terrorist regime in Iran. He closed with 2 words that left no ambiguity about what follows, and we will continue. President Trump announced Khamenei's death on his Truth Social platform Saturday afternoon. "Khamenei, one of the most evil people in history, is dead," he wrote. He called on Iranian security forces to lay down their weapons for immunity or face, in his words, certain death. He stated that heavy and pinpoint bombing would continue uninterrupted throughout the week and said plainly in a video released that day, "We will ensure that Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon." Those 13 words are the stated justification for everything that has happened. Whether the operation achieved that objective is a matter that will now be decided not in Washington or Jerusalem, but inside what remains of Iran's own chain of command. Iran responded with force and without delay. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps launched multiple successive waves of retaliatory missiles and drones against Israel and against 5 U.S. military installations across the region. Confirmed targets included the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the Al Dhafar Air Base in the UAE, the U.S. Fifth Fleet Headquarters in Bahrain, the Ali Al Salam Air Base in Kuwait, and the Muwafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan. The IRGC claimed a U.S. combat support vessel had come under severe missile fire and that a U.S. radar system in Qatar had been completely destroyed. The U.S. military confirmed its forces successfully defended against hundreds of Iranian missile and drone attacks, reporting no U.S. casualties and minimal damage to installations. Iran simultaneously launched approximately 150 ballistic missiles toward Israel in successive salvos, along with dozens of attack drones. Air defense systems intercepted a number of the missiles. One person was killed and at least 20 were wounded when an Iranian missile struck several buildings in central Tel Aviv. Then came a development that transformed a regional military confrontation into a potential global economic catastrophe. The IRGC broadcast an open radio warning to all maritime vessels in the region stating that no ship is allowed to pass the Strait of Hormuz. 20% of all global oil and gas shipments pass through that narrow waterway every single day. Supply chains that feed refineries in Japan, power grids in South Korea, heating systems in Germany, and factories across the developing world. A sustained closure of the strait would not be a regional inconvenience, it would be a global economic shock. Iran simultaneously closed its national airspace until further notice. Nearly 1,000 flights were canceled across the region on Saturday alone, according to aviation analytics firm Cirium. Major carriers including British Airways, Lufthansa, Emirates, Air India, Virgin Atlantic, and Turkish Airlines suspended regional operations. The disruption extended into Sunday and is expected to worsen throughout the week. At an emergency United Nations Security Council session convened Saturday, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres addressed the 15-member body with a warning that drew visible unease from the chamber. Military action carries the risk of igniting a chain of events that no one can control in the most volatile region of the world, Guterres said. I call for de-escalation and an immediate cessation of hostilities. He stated that he deeply regretted that an opportunity for diplomacy had been squandered. Those words, that diplomacy had been squandered, carry particular gravity given that formal nuclear talks between the U.S. and Iran had been ongoing just 48 hours before the first strike. Iran's UN ambassador Amir Saeed Iravani told the Council that the United States and Israel had initiated unprovoked and premeditated aggression, attacking civilian-populated areas in multiple large cities of Iran, where millions of people reside, and declared, "This is not only an act of aggression, it is a war crime and a crime against humanity." The U.S. ambassador to the UN, Mike Waltz, defended the operation without hesitation. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, Waltz said. That principle is not a matter of politics. It's a matter of global security. China expressed deep concern over what it called a sudden escalation of regional tensions. Russia condemned the strikes outright and demanded an immediate cessation of hostilities. The Security Council adjourned without passing any resolution. With the United States holding veto power, no resolution was ever going to pass. Now to the question that stands at the center of tonight's broadcast. The question that is not merely political or military, but existential in the most direct and literal sense of that word. For nearly 2 decades, Ayatollah Khamenei served as both the political director and theological gatekeeper of Iran's nuclear program. He funded it, he used it as diplomatic leverage, and he constrained it. In 2003, Khamenei issued a religious decree, a fatwa, explicitly prohibiting the manufacture, use, and storage of nuclear weapons. That fatwa was, for years, the single most consequential document preventing Iran from crossing the final threshold to a nuclear-armed state. Iran had already enriched uranium to 60% purity. The path from 60% to 90% weapons-grade material is measured not in years, but in weeks. But Khamenei's fatwa held the weaponization order back. That restraint was not mechanical. It was personal. It lived in one man's religious authority. That man is now dead. U.S. intelligence assessments produced in the weeks before the strike studied multiple scenarios for post-Khamenei Iran. One scenario suggested a complete government change was unlikely. The more probable outcome, according to officials briefed on those assessments, was the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps asserting dominant control over the state. The IRGC reported directly to Khamenei. It controls Iran's ballistic missile arsenal, its drone programs, and the physical infrastructure of its nuclear enrichment facilities. With Khamenei gone, the chain of command connecting the supreme leader's authority to nuclear command responsibility is severed. The temporary governing council, now nominally in charge under the Iranian constitution, has legal standing, but no established operational authority over the IRGC. The Assembly of Experts, the constitutional body responsible for appointing a new supreme leader, cannot safely convene while Iran remains under active military bombardment. The succession process is frozen by the operation that made it necessary. A senior Washington-based scholar of Iranian politics who has advised multiple U.S. administrations put it plainly: there will probably be a council set up to run the country. It may already have been running the country, as far as we know. That final phrase contains the full weight of tonight's uncertainty. If real command authority over Iran's nuclear program had already migrated to the IRGC before Khamenei's death, his killing did not create a power vacuum. It merely revealed one that had already formed in the shadows of his declining years. The critical insight from the intelligence community is this: the IRGC, left to its own calculations, might choose to use the nuclear program as a bargaining chip, trading restraint for sanctions relief, security guarantees, or a formal end to hostilities. That is the optimistic scenario. The less optimistic scenario is that a militarily cornered, economically shattered, and leaderless Iran decides the only deterrent it has left against further annihilation is the one weapon its supreme leader's fatwa previously kept off the table. That logic, the logic of a state reaching for its most dangerous remaining card, is not irrational. It is the precise calculation that nuclear deterrence theorists have warned about for decades when modeling the collapse of authoritarian governments with active enrichment programs. The confirmed status of this crisis tonight is as follows. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is dead. A temporary governing council is nominally in charge. The IRGC is the dominant military force remaining intact and operational. Iran's nuclear infrastructure remains active under unclear command authority. Iran's retaliatory strikes against U.S. bases in Israel are ongoing. The Strait of Hormuz has been threatened with closure. The United Nations Security Council has passed no resolution. The U.S. and Israeli bombing continues. Who controls Iran's nuclear weapons now is not a question this broadcast can answer tonight. It is the question that will define the security architecture of the next decade and possibly longer. Every diplomatic backchannel, every intelligence satellite, and every emergency session now underway in capitals around the world is pointed at that same unanswerable darkness. We will continue to follow this story as it develops.